What are some red flags that indicate an unhealthy attachment to digital relationships?
I think in terms of unhealthy digital relationships, it can go in the extreme. So one, some people might fully depend on it so much and not really live their lives anymore outside of the digital platform. So too much dependence on it. Sometimes it can even resemble addiction cravings, wherein we seek or we get that dopamine rush from getting matches, getting noticed online, getting messages. And it's not a bad thing if that's what you're looking for, but then if it goes in the extreme, it might even lead to people not really fully functioning anymore with their day-to-day lives outside of the platform. So too much of that digital relationship dependence, too much of the usage of the apps may be unhealthy if it's skewed towards one way and not balanced anymore with their outside lives. And on the other hand, in terms of the extreme, people that might passively be using these digital platforms, people that are passively engaging in these digital relationships might also not necessarily be the healthiest or the not be a green flag, because they are passively maybe just swiping, they're passively just communicating to multiple people without really actively intentionally thinking about the people on the other side, that there might be people that are getting attached, there are people that are wanting to get to know them. And if they're dealing with these digital relationships without the right intentions, with much passivity, then they're also hurting people on the other side. So any extreme of too much dependence on it or too much passivity with the use of these digital apps, with these digital relationships, that tends to be a red flag. So something in the in between might be ideal, where if you're really trying to seek relationships using digital ways, then maybe putting the effort, the time, having the skills to reflect, to be intentional about it may be the right way to go, rather than being too dependent on it or too passive about it. So just that healthy in between might be ideal.
How can we educate young people to navigate online dating in a way that prioritizes their mental well-being?
I feel like for one, that whole idea itself could be helpful. The fact that it's something that needs to be educated, because a lot of the digital apps, platforms, relationships, they just kind of came about because it was an available space, but then there weren't really any protocols or guidelines. So I think guidelines might help, lots of psychoeducation on what might be important to find in relationships, not just digitally, but also outside of it. Maybe prioritizing the need for communication, for being able to be clear about their intentions, giving education as well about reflection. And that can be done through many ways, whether it's through also social media, right? Making the most of that to be able to provide ideas about healthy, unhealthy relationships, or even healthy and unhealthy use of these digital platforms. Probably even practicing caution, because a lot of times these digital apps also become a space for cyber abuse sometimes to happen, scamming, all of those extreme ways that people take advantage of others. So making them aware of what to also be cautious about, what to watch out for, might be helpful. So both the relational side of things and the digital side of things might be areas that can be used and developed to educate others about how to properly build these relationships. And of course the basics of just like proper communication, proper relationship building, how to get to know people outside of the digital platform can also be used as well and taught to them.
What role do communication skills play in reducing ghosting and unclear relationships?
I feel like communication skills will be the answer for, avoiding ghosting, situationships, because ghosting and situationships itself, or as, concepts, are problems in communication. So by being able to be clear about it, I have clients that have tendencies to avoid and to ghost, and I tend to encourage them to just be able to communicate clearly that maybe they're not ready to be in a relationship, or maybe that's not what they're looking for. Because then being able to clearly communicate where they're at, what they're feeling, what they're expecting, may lessen all of these avoidance via situationships, non-labeling, and ghosting. So I feel like it is the answer to be able to hopefully reduce the tendencies for ghosting and situationships to happen. And that communication usually tends to be something we teach in here, so that that communication may involve, not just talking about things, but how to properly assert themselves, how to set boundaries, proper reflection that also follows that, and being able to also define what their values are. So a lot of times that communication is the behavior, but behind that comes their own ability to recognize their emotions, be aware of where they're at, and the reflection part is also important to teach on top of communication.
How can Gen Z individuals develop emotional resilience in the face of digital rejection and uncertainty?
I think for one, unfortunately, right, digital dating, digital, relationship building can really lead to a lot of rejection. So coming into that with the expectation that rejections might happen, not everyone would really be their cup of tea, might be a good way to be a bit at least more accepting of the situation. But at the same time, it really does help to think and detach ourselves from the idea that because someone ghosts you, because someone does not want to clearly define the relationship, it's your fault. Because a lot of times people that are on the receiving end of being ghosted or being in situationships even though they don't want to, they tend to blame themselves, they tend to reflect that back on them, when in reality it's really the ghosters, the non-labelers that need some work. They're the ones that it's mostly reflective of them rather than the person that is being ghosted or not labeled in a relationship with. So in a way, being able to detach your self-worth, being able to realize that your worth does not depend on someone ghosting you because it's more of a reflection of them than you, would be the best way to approach it. So really managing your perspective about what people do as not really being your fault and not making yourself to blame for that.
Can therapy or counseling help individuals who struggle with the emotional impact of ghosting and situationships? If so, what approaches are most effective?
I guess as a psychologist, I'd be biased and say that yes, therapy would help a lot. Not just actually for the ghosted, but also for the ghosters. And that's what I will always advocate, because those that tend to ghost tend to have what we call avoidant attachment styles. And I always joke around that we really need more avoidance to be in therapy, so that both ways we're able to kind of deal with that. Those that avoid, those that do, not label things, they also need therapy. They would benefit from approaching emotions, conversations that are difficult, because that's exactly the point of therapy, right? We deal with uncomfortable emotions, uncomfortable thoughts. We deal with the traumas that are leading you to tend to avoid and ghost people. We train you to be able to be better at your communication skills. So I feel like I focus a lot on the ghoster because I feel like they would benefit a lot from the therapy, but also those that are ghosted. Over the past maybe 2 years, I've seen really a lot of people that have been subjected to that. And it's very new for our field because, again, as I mentioned, this is not something we learn in grad school. This is something that we kind of, just learn as we go and apply certain therapy techniques too. But what I've found, or because I do tend to come from a behavioral approach, we tend to use therapies such as CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, or DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, wherein we train people that are ghosted, that become very hurt over being in situationships, to really try to work on their perspectives and thoughts, to detach again that self-worth from the rejection that they're receiving, to also feel and validate their emotions, to be able to communicate their needs better, and to be able to also just kind of build that self-compassion and self-care that they need, especially after having been distressed in situations such as this. So yeah, it can work both ways, and I feel like therapy and counseling would definitely be beneficial to working on those wounds, because these ghosting strategies, these situationships, they're all coming from possible attachment wounds, from trauma of like relationships, maybe even family settings that can be processed and can be coped with if equipped with the right space and tools to work through that.
Are there any final thoughts or messages that you would like to say to the people who've been ghosted, or who are ghosters, and who are in a situationship right now?
Maybe three. I'll separate all of those three. For those in situationships, if it's actually something that you define that you will be in a situationship, because a lot of times there's multiple reasons why people may opt for that. So sometimes they have different priorities, sometimes they're still healing from previous things. So if you're both in an agreement, it's not necessarily the worst thing if you're both in the same understanding. But then if someone is already not in the same page as you, then that's when communication can hopefully come in. Hopefully those in situationships will be able to be honest about what they're feeling, to really reflect about what they're feeling in that dynamic, in that situationship, and hopefully be able to communicate that to their partner, to the person that they're interacting with, and just clear things up and not be afraid to end things, not be afraid to define the relationship if needed, because that's you also disservicing yourself if you're not able to assert what it is that you need from the relationship. So just really being open, honest, and communicative about what you need to yourself and to the person you're in a situationship with would be the best way to approach that. Now, for those that are ghosters and ghosted, those ghosters first, as I mentioned, therapy is something that all ghosters are welcome to take. I know that it could be a scary process because sometimes ghosters tend to be the people that are seen as the villain in the story, right? But then the reality is a lot of those that are ghosters or tend to ghost also have wounds. Why? Maybe fears of abandonment, maybe attachment issues from the past. Maybe you've experienced a lot of pain before. Maybe they've been the ones that have also, just really gone through a lot of different stress that makes it hard to confront emotions, confront conflict, and communicate with people. So hopefully you're able to take that first step to recognize that there is space to be able to confront, communicate, and talk about those things. They can go to therapy, and they can also start with exploration, because for sure that is also coming from a place of hurt, right? And for those that are ghosted, there's many of you that probably are experiencing this right now. Probably, it is unfortunately a normal occurrence, but then we don't want to normalize this. It's not fair for people that are ghosted to continue to be ghosted. But I guess it helps to remember that, again, those that are ghosted, it's never your fault. If you want to reflect on certain actions that you want to improve in terms of relationships, you're free to do that. But in general, hopefully being rejected, being ghosted does not define who you are, what your worth is. It's more, again, a reflection of the ghoster that they ghosted you rather than you. It is very painful and hurtful, so you're allowed to also sit with that emotion, that grief, that confusion. You're not crazy for overthinking, for not really receiving closure. It is very difficult. We see a lot more people that are ghosted in distress compared to those that go through normal formal breakups because of just the nature of confusion that's there. So again, they're also welcome to seek help if they need to, but overall just validating what they're feeling, what their emotions are, and also challenging some of the thoughts that question their worth would be a way to go to be able to cope with that better. So that is my final thoughts on all of those three.